Alright, so welcome to my channel. I'm Dakota Walker, and this is Sue the Middle Path. You can see the Chinese writing and then the Sanskrit. So this book is about the middle path, and in so many ways it's maybe not easy to see for just anyone, and it's supposed to be kind of mysterious, and it's supposed to kind of leave you thinking. So with that said, I have not done the first chapter reading yet. So, The Middle Path by D. Walker. The opening of the story. Yoshitaka was often held responsible for his younger brother's actions. Akitaka and Toмотaka accompanied Yoshitaka to their local Buddhist temple. Each morning the temple walls were welcomed by 6 footsteps along a sand path to the ocean mist and fog. Yoshitaka was calm and not easily swayed away from his predetermined course, which remained dear to his nature. He made well thought out actions throughout his days, no matter the path or task. Yoshitaka was always grateful for the loving nature of his family. He showed gratitude for the ability to travel, as a monk, around his homeland of Nihon. Akitaka, the youngest of the brothers, followed in his middle brother's footsteps, where he would develop a passion for playing music. Toмотaka and Akitaka both provided music for their local temple. Yoshitaka was the only one able to obtain a place for the younger brothers to play and practice. On rare occasions, the music played by Akitaka and Toмотaka allowed the two of them to receive gifts. The gifts would ultimately help to feed their family. Yoshitaka participated in secret meetings with monks like himself, with many of them having practiced for 10 or more rotations. Monks that planned the trips to neighboring lands, with hopes to expand their access to the sacred texts and sutras. One monk practiced under Yoshitaka, and his name was Subasudo. Subasudo was slightly older than Toмотaka. He grew up with the 2 younger brothers and directly followed Yoshitaka's footsteps, where he served as his mentee. This allowed for Subasudo to be one of the youngest practicing Buddhist monks under Yoshitaka's guidance. The final preparations were made by Subasudo before he departed from Nihon. As he finished with his task, luckily Subasudo knew he had connections with all 3 brothers who had also planned to make the journey. They intended to make the way together on one of the 4 ships. Subasudo was one of the monks able to travel, by knowing the eldest brother who had helped to secure Subasudo's place on the ship. He often practiced with the eldest brother, as Yoshitaka's family had taken in Subasudo at an incredibly early age, an event that had felt like a long time ago to the 3 brothers but felt as recent as the prior sun to Subasudo, the day when Subasudo's family had perished after an earthquake. All the time spent at the neighboring temple allowed Subasudo to make sense of his existence. More than 600 travelers were ready to make way to Tang, and Subasudo knew this would be his only chance to live a life with greatness. Still young, he felt compelled to make the risk associated with sea travel. A single satchel of supplies accompanied Subasudo, as he knew the ship would be crowded. The trip was not simple by nature. Once they departed, no one knew when or if they would return. Knowing the multitude of risks, he still decided the long days of uncertainty and torment would be worth the stories he could reflect upon for all his remaining days. Entire ships would be lost to the sea, but this did not startle the youthful Subasudo. The 3 brothers and Subasudo were always talking about the possibility of an adventure, especially one of such magnitude. Everyone felt a rush of excitement, except for the brother's sister. The home would easily grow silent upon their absence. Subasudo, often the leader of the 2 younger brothers, was slightly older and appeared wiser from practicing at the temple with Yoshitaka. The time arrived for the 4 young men to depart the island of Aki. They needed to return to the mainland, to depart once again, but this time it would be from the greater area, Nihon. The men would need to find themselves in the Kyushu region, to board a ship destined for Tang. Subasudo gathered his supplies and left a singular hut to meet up with the brothers. Some of the terminology in some of the areas, yes, I'm not going to pronounce perfectly well. I'm not heavily studied in the language of Japanese, and it's like I've had to do a lot of research. I've made sure that the words are accurate. I've made sure I'm getting the right places for the time period. This time period happens to be 838, year 838. It's around the same time that Enin did his travels. But anyways, let's move forward. So Yoshitaka retrieved a packed satchel from his sister, Yukitaka, and so followed his younger brothers, Akitaka and Toмотaka. Yukitaka looked upset when coming to terms that all 3 of her brothers were to leave on a ship. Everyone close to the monks knew this trip was the 19th, and it could easily be their collective last. Her heart raced as she contemplated the possible hardships her dear brothers would face on the open seas. "There is no doubt in my mind that each of you will return in one piece," she exclaimed, as they bid farewell to their sister Yukitaka. "Stop worrying, we'll be back," called Yoshitaka as the younger brothers followed behind him along the dirt path leading further away towards the shipyard. "No promises," yelled Akitaka as both his brothers stopped and waited for an apology. "Sorry," Akitaka called back to soothe Yukitaka's nerves. The three brothers met up with Subasado as they neared the smaller rowing boat. Once they boarded the boat, the four of them helped row towards the mainland to embark on an adventure. Once ashore, the four of them would hurry to position themselves on a ship headed to Tang. Akitaka, Tomitaka, and Yoshitaka were the first to board. Subasado stopped and looked around, taking in the sights since his life was on the precipice of change. Not much was said among the four as they all thought of the horrors from the past expeditions. The odds of their success were equal to the odds of their possible demise. Subasado slowly made his way to board the ship, as Akitaka and Tomitaka had brought along their instruments. The two helped other monks carry a koto onto the ship, but Yoshitaka had to step in so the two would not drop the near person-length instrument. Akitaka, carrying his biwa, which he often plucked and would play for anyone that was willing to listen. The best times were often found during the comforts of a fire with a fermented rice beverage. Akitaka would serenade all to stop and listen. Subasado wondered which brother played the koto, because neither Akitaka nor Tomitaka presented with enough stamina to play such an instrument. So it must have been for some other musician. By the looks of those aboard the ship, other musicians were easily spotted around every other satchel. Tomitaka played the San no Suzumi, a double-headed hand drum shaped like an hourglass. Yukitaka had hand-sewn a special casing just for Tomitaka's drum as a parting gift. Subasado looked forward to hearing about the expansion of the younger brother's musical capabilities. The two were invited to play music and comfort those out among the choppy seas. Yoshitaka and Subasado both left as scribes with the sole purpose of collecting and editing sacred Buddhist texts to hopefully one day return to the temples of Nihon and share their findings. Subasado spent much of the recent years learning the trade of scribe under Yoshitaka's guidance. And so that's the opening of the story. Chapter 1 then begins, and this is Philomena Melton did the cover art for this, and she also did a lot of cyano prints, and they are featured in this. Now the hardcover edition has much more like is not as kind of like faded looking and stuff like that. I kind of like the paperback with this, but I made the hardcover special edition. So the hardcover has a glossy cover instead of the matte finish. The matte finish, you know, like me, I really like small, you know, spiritually significant books, those kind of things. But there's some really cool parts in this book, and I'm really proud of it. I think it's kind of necessary that I'm at some point get up here and like start to do some readings from it. There's a section where like Sue, the main character, Subasado, which the Tomitaka, Akitaka, Yoshitaka, they all start to be called Yoshi, Tomo, Aki, and then we have Sue. So that's the main character, but this also means like arbor and stuff like that. So anyways, there are some parts that are more poetic, and I really, really like some of these sections, and I think that they're pretty significant to like me as a writer, because at one point in time I was just doing poetry and I still would call myself a poet, but yeah. So anyways, I have Sue's Reflections, which in this weird way is this like kind of really short kind of dive into like because I'm inspired by the Tao Te Ching. I'm not going to go and say this is like part of the Tao, like this is the Tao Te Ching or anything like that. Like it's not that significant in my opinion, because it'd be really hard to do that. But Sue's Reflections are from a place of like meditation and like trying to really find himself. And by the time you get to page 53, it's a short story. It's a little under 100 pages. You can kind of see the text and stuff like that. So there's some gaps. I just kind of like that, because if you look at like Musashi's Five Rings, those kind of things, you will find like there's space to write, or there's space to like, you know, look at some blank area of the page, which, you know, kind of process what just happened. I would say about this story, there's a lot of like events that's pretty compact, and that's like kind of intentional in that part. It's really supposed to be this kind of like expression and expressive way, and like kind of like short, like almost like mini events happening throughout this entire thing. But I'll read a little bit of Sue's Reflections. So one, deep among cloak canopies, darkness thrashes against the breeze. Seas toss and turn the falling leaves. Eerie hoots cusp ears. A soft face hardened to stone, the passing winds endure. Two, at the raging of the seas, the screaming of the rivers, one venture ends to fall inward through the forced calm. The deeper journey unfolds. So there's 20. Hold up. I got my Roman numeral. 22 of them. There's other little bits of poetry. There's like where because he's a scribe, so he's like going in there and he's trying to like translate some of these sacred texts and stuff like that, which are directly inspired from the first story I wrote, which is Ashoka and the Golden Tree. This predates. This is the father of Bassa and Flight of Bassa, so this predates all that. And then yeah, so check out Sue the Middle Path. I know if you do Google that or you say Sue book, you will find it. Especially if you're on Amazon, because that's where it's at. But anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. I know I stumble sometimes when I read. I know I'm like not always looking at the screen. When I talk to people, I don't always look at them in the eye. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you go check this out. It is currently on Amazon. It's on Kindle. It might even be on Kindle Unlimited right now. I kind of go back and forth with that. I'm not really getting a lot of traffic, so any support helps. If you hate Amazon, you don't want to go through that, feel free to like message me on one of my platforms. It's usually D Walker Poetry on Facebook and on